Here we go. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Tuesday, October 1st, 2019 meeting of the Edina City Council. Where did the summer go? Here we are into fall already. We are going to next do roll call, I think, and then we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. So roll call, please, Ms. Allison.
Member Fisher?
Here.
Member Staunton?
Here.
Member Brindle?
Here.
Member Anderson?
Here.
Mayor Hovland?
Here. For those of you that care to join us in saying the Pledge of Allegiance, please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have a form of meeting agenda in front of us this evening, and is there anyone that wishes to modify the agenda? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as shown.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to adopt the form of meeting agenda as shown. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Now we're going to move on to the community comment portion of the agenda. And I think for folks that are here this evening that want to speak during community comment, some of the people that come from Edina are regular, some of the regular attendees know that we have a 3-minute policy where we want to make sure everybody gets treated equally from a time standpoint, and we respect that that time allocation, and you'll get a yellow sort of warning light when you start. You'll get a green light, and then with 30 seconds left, there'll be a yellow cautionary light that comes on, and then that's a good message for you to be thinking about wrapping up your comments, so that when you hit the red light, you're ready to wrap up, and then we get to treat everybody the same. And whatever the issue is you wish to talk about, you're more than welcome to address with the council. We'll take it under advisement. I see some folks here tonight that I think have some things I want to address with the Edina City Council, and we're here to listen. So for those of you in the audience that wish to address the council on a matter of concern to them, please come forward. Good evening. And then would you give us your name and address too, please?
I will. I'm actually not comfortable giving my address because I know that these meetings are recorded and broadcast, so I can give it privately off camera if that's necessary. My name is Shara Blanche. I'm a resident of Richfield, and I'm here to speak about an incident that involves both the Edina and Richfield communities, the murder of Brian J. Quinones on September 7th, 2019. Brian was shot mere seconds after exiting his car. The current state of policing in our country is abysmal. Police use of force is the 6th leading cause of death for men ages 25 to 29. Brian was barely over that age. He was 30. Edina has a long history of poor relations with communities of color. This was documented by the Edina Race and Equity Task Force, and which included 21 recommendations. Despite those recommendations, Brian, a Latino man, was still killed. The actions of officers Nicholas Peterson and Benjamin Winande were unnecessary. The 16 shots heard on the video Brian took resulted in the death of a man who has a family. He has a wife, a 12-year-old son, a brother, a sister, a mother, a father, cousins, and many other friends and family members who are left to understand how this happened to Brian. Brian did everything right. He and his wife have been together for over half their lives, since they were 13 years old. In fact, I attended their wedding reception 5 years ago this past weekend. He was an involved father who spent time with his son and did everything he could to ensure that his son had a better life than he did, something all of us who are parents want for our children. Brian worked for General Mills for over 5 years and was so loved by that company that many managers and executives attended his funeral. Brian was often known for giving away the last few dollars he had to ensure that people who were experiencing homelessness had a meal for the day. That is the Brian his family knew, and the officers of the city of Edina stole that from them. Given what has been stolen from this family, as a community member of Richfield, which neighbors Edina, and as someone who knew Brian, though not very well, I am demanding that all video footage of the incident be released. The news reports have stated that that will not happen. That must happen. That needs to happen within the next week, with the option that the Quiñones family review the videos prior to them being released to the public. Videos of an officer-involved shooting in St. Paul that occurred a week after Brian was murdered have been released. This family deserves the same. Second demand, the officers who shot Brian must be fired. Despite the city having assembled a race and equity task force, co-led by one of my good friends, Jessica Kingston, who's also a known racial equity leader in the Twin Cities area. After the incident involving Edina Lieutenant Tim Larson and Larney Thomas in 2016, officers Nicholas Peterson and Benjamin Winarney still used excessive and deadly force with Brian Quiñones. These officers cannot be trusted to keep all community members safe. They must not be on the streets of Edina again. The city of Edina must support criminal charges. The city for the officers from Edina and from Richfield who shot Brian. The officers had many options that they did not utilize, and their failure to do so resulted in the death of Brian Quiñones. The city will support second-degree murder charges against these officers. This will not bring Brian back, but it will allow some closure for the family and the community. Lastly, the city of Edina will implement body-worn cameras for all officers beginning in January of 2020. This is necessary in order to hold officers accountable for their actions. Other cities in Minnesota have implemented body-worn cameras. There is a model to follow, and there is no reason for Edina to not do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Blanche. All right, anyone else? Yes, sir. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Hovland, members of the City Council. My name is Jeff Hayward. I live at 6709 Rosemary Lane in Edina, and I'm here to discuss a criminal matter that's being brought against my parents by the City of Edina. My parents are Ed and Ellie Hayward. They're 40-year Edina residents. They live on Lake Cornelia. Somehow, by undertaking an effort to remove buckthorn from the rear of their house on Lake Cornelia, they were caught up in a crossfire of illegal action being brought by the city against several adjacent property owners and themselves. I'm going to be honest with you, I'm furious at the way the city has treated my parents, and I'm angry that this matter continues to fester. My parents are confused, they're scared, and they're scared about the prospect of criminal prosecution, and it's unbelievably difficult as their son to watch them go through this. And so for tonight, I'd like to make 2 points to you and one request. Point number 1, the Edina City Council has a charter. I got it off the website. It reads as follows. The mayor and the council are responsible for the efficient operation of the city government through policies and ordinances that are carried out by the council-appointed city manager. My parents first contacted me about this matter in November of 2017 after a police detective visited their house and interrogated them about the removal of plants behind their house. As you can imagine, it weighed heavy on their minds for quite some time and led to numerous frantic calls to me and to others. Almost 2 years later, after they had finally seemed to accept my assurances that the city would not do something as silly as criminally prosecute them for removing buckthorn behind their house, They were served with a notice for criminal arraignment, requesting that they be arrested or detained or subjected to whatever means are necessary to secure their appearance in Hennepin County Criminal Court. 2 years. 2 years this matter weighed on my parents. They're elderly, and my father, the named defendant, suffers from Parkinson's disease and has declined significantly over that time, to the point that he can no longer effectively represent himself in court. There's a reason why your charter mandates that you direct the efficient operation of the city government, and this is a perfect example of why. Deference to staff does not constitute efficient operation. Point number 2, my parents, are being prosecuted under City Code 24-254, which provides in relevant part that no person in any park, street, sidewalk, or publicly owned property shall cut, break, remove, or in any way injure or deface any tree, shrub, or plant. Injure any plant. I want you to think about that for a minute. That provision allows the city to criminally prosecute individuals for in any way injuring a plant on city grounds. What about a hard slide at a soccer game in a city park? What about taking a divot out of the 14th fairway at Braemar? And theoretically, these are actions that would be prosecutable under City Code 24-254. It's an unbelievable amount of prosecutorial discretion, and the problem with granting the city that latitude is that it can be wielded in an indiscriminate fashion or to facilitate personal agendas. My parents intended that buckthorn and vines be removed from the property in question, that is captured in the police report. The reason they asked that this be done is because the city had not done it, and those noxious plants were invading their property. It's happening all over Edina. It's hardly efficient for the city to use its discretion to pursue a criminal action against those that would carry out a service that the city should have been doing in the first place. So I mentioned a request. I come before you tonight with one simple request, that you carry out your charter to assure the efficient operation of the city government, end this inefficient and mean-spirited action on the part of the city, and allow my parents to going back to living in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hayward.
I'm going to need the visual. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you, John. The green light's not on. I don't know. What? Oh, it'll turn on? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I was waiting for the green light to go. My name is Julie Risser. I live at 6112 Ashcroft Avenue. I'm here tonight because I'm concerned about money being spent on local elections that cannot be connected to individuals. In Minnesota, there's no government entity that investigates whether state election laws are followed for municipal elections. My images are very dense. I don't have time to go deep. I have 3 minutes. When this happens, citizens must step up and act. There's several factors that stymie citizen investigations, and I will be going through some of those as I address these issues. Note, we will be looking at a postcard that specifies one particular city council member. I ask that people use their imagination and just think about somebody who maybe you would not want to have in city council. Candidates cannot control what happens with their campaign material. If we have enough time after I'm done, I can tell you what happened to mine in 2006. In 2018, there was a postcard that was distributed widely in Edina. It did not have a disclaimer. It included the very clear message to vote for one candidate. It had his official candidate website, and it also had his statement that he used over and over again, that he would oppose the lid and pump the brakes on runaway development. There was no way to find out who sent it. There was one clue, and that was the permit number on the back for mailing. After many months, I was able to find out that this belonged to Dale Kirshner, who has a company called Candidate Forum Associates. Mr. Kirshner was also running for city council in Excelsior. I did file a complaint against Mr. Kirshner. It was dropped because vendors are not held responsible for failing to put disclaimers on political literature. It is their clients who are held accountable. There were community groups that were supporting individual candidates in 2018. One of them was Stop the Lid. Stop the Lid was also its website included on this postcard. The founder of Stop the Lid, Bruce Christensen, very clearly on his website endorsed candidates, including Ron Anderson, for city council. So I filed a complaint against Bruce Christensen. Bruce Christensen no longer runs Stop the Lid. He has a new site called We Can Do Better Edina, and it is actively seeking candidates to run in 2020. Note, in Minnetrista, there was an organization called Our Minnetrista, and there were 3 individuals who did get in trouble for violating campaign finance, but it was only a $5,000 fine. Upshot, I got a subpoena. I was able to get some information about who, I thought I could get the name of the client. I did not, because he submitted a motion for intervention and protection, claiming his First Amendment rights were violated, and the judge sided with him. He weighed the balance, whether it was appropriate to side with the electorate and inform them as to who paid for this political postcard, or uphold the rights of John Doe to engage in anonymous pamphleteering. And so it was noted that it was the right to remain anonymous, and that this protects people from retaliation for their ideas. But the upshot is an individual was able to spend $12,502 on Mr. Kushner's services. $10,502 of this money went for the postcard. And I find it really unsettling that if you donate $100 to a campaign, your name gets recorded. If you spend thousands of dollars working with a vendor, you can remain anonymous, basically funding a parallel campaign. And the Office of Administrative Hearings, this is also troubling, doesn't have the power to investigate, which means that the Office of Administrative Hearings has no way of finding out who John Doe is. Is John Doe a resident of Edina, a resident of Minnesota, a resident of the United States? This really opens up the door for anybody and any entity to engage in this. This is not anonymous pamphleteering.
Ms. Risser, I'd let you drift over on time. I need to have you, what is it you want the council to be thinking about, or the action?
I would like the council to be aware of this. Also, when I contacted the city to let them know about this postcard, it was a message that was basically, this has happened before, and I think the city just needs to be aware of the fact that this is happening. And also, I would encourage people to contact their state representatives. Municipal elections deserve to be kept as clean as state elections, and we need to have an investigative authority. It cannot fall to citizens to act. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Risser. Anyone else wish to address the council?
My name is Frank Lorenz, 7151 New York Avenue South in Edina. I've been an Edina resident for about 36 years. Earlier today, I attended a Hennepin County Commission board meeting, and among a number of things that they discussed was providing body cameras for the Hennepin County Sheriff's deputies, including patrolmen and women, and the deputies that safeguard the courts system in downtown Minneapolis, and the deputies that run the corrections facility in Plymouth, formerly known as the workhouse. But in any event, there's a proposal that is being considered now to equip 450 people, or at least buy 450 cameras, slightly different type of camera for the people that monitor the jail and the workhouse, slightly less sophisticated than the cameras it would be for the people that are driving on patrol. The cost of that over a 3-year period is approximately $5 million. That includes camera updates and the maintenance of the historical data that's collected by the cameras. Just a couple of things. Once the electronic footage is produced, it probably has to be kept in some storage mechanism for anywhere from 10 to 20 years because it can be called up by the courts on appeals, and if it's a felony involved, those appeals can go on for much more than 10 years. The maintenance of those electronic images and the vetting of them so that you don't expose innocent people that were caught on camera but have nothing to do with the crime. The maintenance of a secure library of those images is very expensive, and if you don't do it right, you'll be sued. So body cameras are not a panacea. They don't capture everything, but they're a lot better than having no images. So if the City Council is going to move forward in this direction, I think that you need a rigorous evaluation of what the total wraparound costs of body cameras are, rather than just plunge into it as the next trend, fad, latest, greatest thing.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lorenz. And the city is working on that. It has been for, I think, over the past year, and Manager Neal may comment on that this evening or next meeting, but it is something that we're working on and doing it in a very logical way. Anyone else wish to address the council on a matter of concern to them this evening?
Good evening. I'm Floyd Grable, 7510 Cahill Road. I spoke here at the last meeting concerning Mr. Quinoni's death. I asked several questions. One of the questions I asked specifically was why the Edina police don't have body cameras. And according to your agenda, I'm kind of waiting for hear if the city manager has any response to some of the things that I said last week. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Our practice has been that we have a meeting the first and third Tuesdays generally of the month, and then the prior meeting, issues that are raised that we carry over, that we want to have some staff input on, the city manager addresses those community comments in the subsequent meeting. And so from the meeting 2 weeks ago, the city manager has some responses prepared, and we'll go to that now. Manager Neal.
Thank you, Your Honor. We had 5 commenters at our meeting on September 17th. Al Alexander was here to talk about utility easements around his home. City engineer Milner and his staff are meeting on site with Mr. Alexander tomorrow to go over those easements and who's been in them. Mr. Graybill also asked a number of questions, some of which I can answer and some of which I'm not able to answer tonight. But one of his questions that was asked was about body-worn cameras. And yes, we have been talking about body-worn cameras from a budget standpoint and a procedure standpoint for probably 2 years. They've been in our budget queue, and they are in the budget queue to be purchased next year. So we fully anticipate that we're going to be going forward with the process, the necessary community intersection that we need to do according to state law to engage the community and talk a little bit about how we will use body-worn cameras in this community, which is required before we purchase and implement them. But we will purchase and implement them in 2020. Roberta Castellano talked last time about a number of what she saw as inconsistencies between the version of our comprehensive plan that is in current circulation with our adjoining communities, and what the council has previously approved in some level of detail. And Carrie Teague, our community development director, has went through her detailed explanation and has found a number of times where she is correct. So details of what she viewed on film versus what was in print were inconsistent, and we want to assure you that ultimately what you have previously approved and what she has found will be in the next draft of the comprehensive plan, which should be online on October 11th. We still have the time frame where we're receiving comments from our adjoining communities. We also have the opportunity, we also have one required public hearing at the Planning Commission, one required public hearing at the council level before that document is approved before the end of the year, and then it heads to the Metropolitan Council where it has, goes through their analysis as well. Nikki Williams spoke about a neighbor who has had some trouble with a residential redevelopment project, so we're pursuing that to figure out what happened there. And also, she has been involved in that subject in terms of trying to encourage us to be more involved sometimes in residential redevelopment, particularly in a stance of protecting neighbors. And so we are looking at that. If you'll recall, last year we did do a proactive educational outreach to our contractors, the contracting community, building community, et cetera, and offered not quite an endorsement, but at least recognition for those builders who took the time to spend probably I think almost 4 hours with us on a day where we talked about how to be a good contractor and what that means in the community and how to interact with staff in that setting. So we thought that was very helpful, and so did they. Finally, Mr. Lorenz spoke last time, and he had a number of comments about policing and criminal justice, but no questions that I could answer. So we have.
All right, good, thank you. Does that prompt any questions or comments from council members with regard to that report? All right, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there anyone on the council that wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda in its entirety.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second to adopt the consent agenda as shown. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. And next, we are going to move on to the special recognitions and presentations portion of the agenda. And the first matter in front of us this evening involves something that Member Brindle called to my attention. I knew about it, but I hadn't thought about doing anything other than congratulating him privately about being designated a legislator of distinction for the 2019 session. But is Representative Elkins here?
Yep.
There he is. So we got a memorandum from. Yeah, you can stand up, Mr. Modesty. We got a memorandum from Gary Carlson over at the League of Minnesota Cities back in late July, telling us that Steve Elkins, who represents our city at the state legislature, had been selected as a League of Minnesota Cities Legislator of Distinction for 2019. So having received that correspondence, we're going to introduce tonight a resolution of appreciation for Representative Steve Elkins, dated today, October 1st, 2019, and that resolution reads as follows. Whereas Steve Elkins was elected to the Minnesota House of Representatives to represent District 49B, and began as part of the began his service as part of the 91st Minnesota Legislature. And whereas as part of the 91st Minnesota Legislature, Representative Elkins served on the local government commerce, governmental operations, state government finance division, and transportation finance and policy division committees. Your experience was in hot demand, even though you were a rookie at the time. That's probably more committee assignments than veteran legislators have. And whereas Representative Steve Elkins authored city-friendly legislation that would allow for the repeal of a ban on cities to regulate plastic bags, authority for cities to implement street improvement districts, establish a fund to pay for local components of state highway projects, and dedicate funds to non-municipal state aid city streets. And whereas Representative Steve Elkins was named a League of Minnesota Cities Legislator of Distinction for 2019, now I, therefore, James B. Hovland, Mayor of the City of Edina, do hereby express the City of Edina's thanks and appreciation for representation at the state capitol to the Honorable Steve Elkins. The Edina City Council thanks Representative Elkins for serving our constituents and working with state and local officials to reach solutions that meet the needs of Minnesotans across the state. Without the support of legislative leaders like Steve Elkins, a state-local partnership would not be successful. Is there a motion to adopt a resolution of appreciation?
So moved.
Yeah, you're getting a lot of movers here. And is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to adopt a resolution of appreciation. Steve, it has been passed. I'm going to come down and hand it to you. And congratulations on this. Ward, that asked you to make a couple comments about your first legislative session, and take a photo, I think, first.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this recognition. I really appreciate it. As you guys, everybody here knows, I've spent over 20 years in local and regional government before coming here, and I find it once it's local government is in your blood, it kind of stays there. So I've been happy to work with the league and with Metro Cities on various initiatives this session, and was happy to be someone that they trusted to carry their bills, especially related to transportation stuff. I mean, probably my signature accomplishment in my first year was the 2 speed limit bills that were passed, that were cited in the Star Tribune the other day, and Council Member Stott, you were the impetus for one of the 2 of them. So take a bow yourself on that one. But I this summer I kept attending Metro Cities Improving Local Economies committees, and that's Transportation Local Government League of Minnesota Cities Improving Local Economies committees. I've been attending those 2 committees probably in one role or another for about 20 years now. So it just hard to give up the habit, but as long as I'm welcome there, I'm always going to be a partner for the cities in this state. So thank you very much for this recognition.
It was a pleasure being able to recognize you, and thanks for all that great work, and we know that you'll be stepping it up to the next level over there.
Yeah, and I got 5 committees basically because I made the mistake of letting the speaker know that I was going to be otherwise retired, and so she took it as an opportunity to load me up. So.
Oh, all right. Okay.
But thank you very much.
All right. We'll put Member Staunton back to work on thinking of some other legislation for you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. One other matter under the special recognitions and presentations portion of the agenda this evening, and that's introduction. We have a new Minnesota Green Corps member, and some folks might wonder, what's a Minnesota Green Corps? What's the Minnesota Green Corps? What does it mean to be a Minnesota Green Corps member? And Tara Brown, our sustainability coordinator, is here to explain all of that this evening and introduce our new, I don't know what we'd call you, a Green Corps member, intern, or member. Just call her. All right.
So, Mayor and members of council, I'm honored to share that Edina was selected for a second time to host a Green Corps member. Green Corps members are part of a AmeriCorps program, which is to preserve and protect the Minnesota environment while training the new generation of environmental professionals. This program is hosted out of MPCA, and there are only 42 members a year that serve the overall Minnesota state. So we were selected as one of those 42. This year, Chloe Weld will work on energy efficiency in our facilities under the air quality theme. So she will do many great things and visit all of our facilities to review lighting audit, aerators, all this low-hanging fruit that can make a big difference in managing our facilities, which will help the bottom line, conserve energy, and ultimately improve air quality. So I'd like to introduce Chloe Weld.
Chloe,
Hello.
welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to meet you all. So I guess I'll just provide a little bit of background on myself. I grew up in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, which is a small town, 80 miles east of the Twin Cities. I moved here 3 years ago for school. I'm a recent graduate of the U of M. I got a BS in Sustainable Systems Management. One of the things that I'm very passionate about and that I did my emphasis on in college is energy conservation. So I'm very excited and thankful to be working with Tara over the next 11 months on energy efficiency projects for the city. So,
Good. Well, Chloe, welcome. We're
Thank you.
pleased to have you here.
thank you.
And our thanks to the MPCA for, again, choosing Edina to host one of these members. So
Yeah.
look forward to working with you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thanks.
We've got 11 public hearings this evening, and some of the matters are things that we have to deal with annually, and we're going to start out with the public hearing on aquatic vegetation, potential special assessment there, and Jessica Wilson, our Water Resources Coordinator, has this first matter. Welcome, Ms. Wilson.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So I have for you tonight the special assessment for aquatic vegetation management. And this is a city-administered service where we manage aquatic vegetation in water bodies. There's some criteria in our comprehensive water resource management plan that defines eligibility for those services. These are services that are requested by property owners. It's not anything that would be required by the Minnesota DNR. And we have 4 water bodies that are receiving these services and are assessed for those services. Thank you. So the first one, Arrowhead Lake, there are 36 accessible units shown here in green. The Arrowhead Lake Association was incorporated in September of 2015. They've had service for many, many years. I just have a little bit of history here to give you a sense of what that assessment has looked like in the recent past. And in 2019, the assessment for those services, which include aeration and destruction of submerged aquatic plants, treatment of algae, and a lake dye, that divided amongst those accessible units is $127.38 per property. At Indian Head Lake, the Indian Head Lake Association was incorporated in May of 2016, so they have a board that makes those requests and approves those services. And there's a brief history of the assessment for those services, which are similar to at Arrowhead Lake. And then in 2019, the assessment per property is $1,213.79. Lake Nancy was, the Lake Nancy Lake Association incorporated in February of 2016. They've just begun some services, and the assessment per property in 2019 is $100.26. And then for the Mill Pond, there's a tiered assessment protocol there. So it's either a full residential equivalent unit or 2/3 or 1/3. So again, kind of a breakdown of the recent history, although the service has been going on for many, many years. And in 2019, you can see the breakdown for 1, 2/3, and 1/3 REU there. So my recommendation for you tonight is to adopt that resolution 201973 for each of those water bodies at those rates. And with that, I'll stand for any questions that you have.
All right. Questions? Questions for Ms. Wilson on this matter? All right. Stand by. I like the way you've consolidated all these things into a single resolution. We used to take them one at a time, so it's nice to do it this way. I'm going to open this matter up for public testimony, public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to comment regarding the proposed resolution? which would adopt the special assessments shown by staff for aquatic vegetation control and lake services at Arrowhead Lake, Indian Head Lake, Lake Nancy, and Minnehaha Creek Mill Pond. Anyone wish to come forward and testify? All right, seeing no one coming forward, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Is there a second? Got a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Discussion? All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2019-73, which would approve those special assessments for the proposed aquatic vegetation control lake services that we provided at Arrowhead Lake, Indian Head Lake, Lake Nancy, and the Minnehaha Creek Mill Pond?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second on Resolution 2019-73 as described. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Next matter is a public hearing on the proposed weed mowing special assessment. And Tom Swenson, our Assistant Director of Parks and Natural Resources, has this matter.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm here tonight for the weed mowing assessments. City Code Chapter 30 says that weeds shall be regularly cut or controlled so that no individual plant exceeds 10 inches in length, and noxious weeds as defined by the State Commissioner of Agriculture shall be eradicated. When weeds exceed 10 inches in height, the weed inspector attempts to first reach the property owner in person, second by phone, and lastly by certified letter. The owner has 10 days to comply. Park maintenance staff then cuts the weeds and the property is assessed the cost of labor and equipment. 9 properties in 2019 were cut by park maintenance staff. This is the first grouping of addresses. And the second grouping. And it should be noted that on top of the hourly rate, there's also a $30 administrative fee. And with that, we request that these 9 properties be assessed on a 1-year term.
All right. Questions for Mr. Swenson?
I just have one.
Member Fisher.
So I noticed on the assessment roll, a couple properties that just, it looks like it's just rolling from year to year. Well, actually, I guess it was only once last year. But if they choose not to pay it, what happens?
So the assessment will be put on their property taxes, but these year-to-year properties are actually a problem for us because there's a few addresses here that we're in front of you every year for.
So it's just an ongoing process. But are they paying them then through their taxes, essentially?
Yes.
So it's a really expensive lawn service.
Or fairly affordable. We're actually we're looking at maybe investigating.
Actually, now that I look at it, I'm paying way more than that. Yeah.
We're looking at changing the way this is set up.
Okay.
Other questions for Mr. Swenson? This is a public hearing matter. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to open this up for public testimony. The public hearing is now open. Is there anyone who wishes to inquire of the council or question or challenge an assessment, proposed assessment? All right. Hearing nothing and seeing no one coming forward, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Is there a second? Got a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Any further discussion? All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
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 Opposed? Carried. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2019-74, which would approve the special assessments as proposed by staff for weed mowing on these 9 properties?
So moved.
All right. Second. Is there a second? Got a motion and a second. Discussion? All those in favor of adopting the Resolution 2019-74 to assess these 9 properties, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Next matter Mr. Swenson also has is a tree removal special assessment, proposed assessment.
Yep, so similar to the weeds assessments, we have the tree removal. 2 pieces of city code that relate. Chapter 30 says that the tree inspector finds and controls the spread of diseased trees. Chapter 24 says trees must be clear of vegetation growth to a height of 16 feet above the curb or edge of the street, and sidewalks must be clear to a height of 8 feet. So this process, the city forester identifies diseased, improper clearance, and public safety trees and notifies the homeowner by registered mail. They have 21 days to comply. Homeowners have the option to remove and dispose of the trees on their own. 7 properties chose to have the city contract removal or trimming of their trees. The city forester secures quotes from private contractors. The cost per tree varies greatly depending on the size of the tree and location. And the city staff doesn't remove these diseased trees. It's a private contractor. And then because the expense is a little higher on this one, the assessments are spread over multiple years depending on the price point or by request of the homeowner. And these are the addresses that were addressed in this cycle. And again, we also attach a $30 administrative fee on top of the contractor's costs. So again, we request that these properties be assessed for these dollars.
Questions for Mr. Swenson, Member Brindle?
Thank you. Tom, is the city notified by a resident that they suspect they have a diseased tree? Is it on their easement? How does the city find out about this?
So Luther is here tonight to help with technical questions, our city forester. So he can probably answer that question better than me.
So for our diseased trees here in Edina, we have our oak wilt contracted out by a private contractor. Just because with oak wilt, the only way to get a positive confirmation is to get a lab test done. And so I'm just not capable of doing that myself. And then for Dutch elm disease, that's the other main disease, I receive phone calls frequently from neighbors or residents themselves with questions about their trees. Myself and my assistant during the summer, we kind of divide up the city ourselves and drive the city looking, actively looking for these trees ourselves. And when we see something suspicious, pull over, go notify them, make sure if anyone's home, they know we're there, and then kind of let them know what we're doing. And most of the time, people kind of know something's wrong when their tree is dropping its leaves in the middle of the summer, and so it's you kind of have an idea something's going wrong, but that's kind of how we do it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Other questions for Mr. Swenson at this point in time? All right, this is a public hearing matter. If anyone wishes to testify regarding one of these proposed assessments, feel free to come forward. Seeing no one coming forward, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Is there a second? We got a motion and a second to close the public hearing regarding proposed resolution 2019-75, the tree removal special assessment. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. And is there a motion to adopt resolution 2019-75, which would provide for these 7 properties being specially assessed for the tree removal that took place as described by Mr. Swenson? Is there a motion?
So moved.
All right.
Second.
Is there a second? And a motion and a second to approve resolution 2019-75, the tree removal special assessment resolution. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. And the next matter is one that Mr. Barnes has. I saw him standing in the wings there. Here he is. This is a proposed, this is a public hearing regarding a proposed special assessment, which is annual, down in the 50th and France Maintenance District. Mr. Barnes, welcome.
Thank you.
Mr. Barnes, for those of you that don't know him, is our city facilities manager.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Tonight we will be going over the improvements of the 50th and France location, which is generally west of 100 and north and south of 50th and 51st Street, made up of 175 upscale businesses, retail, spa, and others downtown.
East of it.
It consists mostly of sidewalk maintenance, 2 parking ramps, tree maintenance, trash removal, tree decorating, etc. throughout the district there. This year, the assessment costs were $277,882.57. working out to 0.65 cents a square foot. It is a decrease over last year by a total of $12,740. We made an conscious effort to curtail costs there with the redevelopment of the Nolan Mains and the North Project, and we wanted to help our businesses in the district there have an affordable construction experience as everything was going on in the neighborhood. Here is our assessment history. I'm asking that you approve this assessment, M19, here for 0.65 cents a square foot.
Good. Any questions for Mr. Barnes? All right, this is also a public hearing matter. I'm going to open it up at this point in time for public testimony. Is there anyone who wishes to come forward and testify regarding this proposed special assessment for maintaining properties down at the 50th and France Maintenance District? Seeing no one coming forward, hearing nothing, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Is there a second? Got a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Any further discussion? All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. Is there a motion approving Resolution 2019-76, which would approve the proposed special assessment for 50th and France Maintenance Improvement M19 area as described by Mr. Barnes? So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve Resolution 2019-76 as described. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. Mr. Barnes has the next matter, and that is also a potential special assessment in the Grandview Business District. Mr. Barnes.
Yes, so the Grandview District is generally west of 100, north of Our Lady of Angels Catholic Church, and south of Interlaken. The assessment there was for $887.51 for the year. It's generally composed of irrigation and irrigation repairs to the medians there. You can see it was a decrease over the previous year of roughly $1,000. I'm asking that we approve this special assessment of G19 for .0019 per square foot.
Any questions for Mr. Barnes on the proposed assessment for the Grandview Business District? All right, stand by, Mr. Barnes. This is, again, a public hearing matter. I'm opening it up for public testimony. Is there anyone that wishes to testify regarding this proposed special assessment in the Grandview Business District? Hearing nothing and seeing no one coming forward, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
And a motion and second to close the public hearing on regarding Resolution 2019-77. Any further discussion? All those in favor of closing the public hearing say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2019-77, which would specially assess the properties in the Grandview Business District as proposed or shown by Mr. Barnes?
So moved.
Second.
We got a motion and second to adopt Resolution 2019-77, assessing properties in the Grandview Business District as described. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr. Milner. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor.
John Park D neighborhood.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. As we've done the last 4 to 5 years, I thought I'd quickly share some survey results from our projects that we're going to consider tonight with the public hearing. So this is from the neighborhoods listed, and these are the 2018 street reconstruction projects. So just a note that this was before we started utilizing Better Together website. So the project areas, Concord, A and G is just around Valley View and Highway 62. We got West 62nd Street between Valley View and France Avenue. We had Country Club C, which is right in the corner of 50th and Wooddale. Normandale Park, just south of 62 at Valley View Road, Valley Lane, Tracy Avenue. Chowan Park D is the 54th Street, previous gravel road, just west of Xerxes Avenue. Bredesen Park A, with some cul-de-sacs there at 62 and 169. So the response rates between the neighborhoods really varied. We see we had 17%, 7%, 14%, 16, Chowan Park with 7 residents, we had 3 respondents, so we had 43%. So overall, we had about a 15% return rate on these surveys. And here's how that's varied over the years. So 2014 was our high of 46%. We had 26 and 29% in 2015 and 16. And the last couple of years, right around 14 to 15% response rate on this survey. So we asked 10 questions. So the first question, how effective was the communication you received prior to construction? And each one of these, we show the previous 5 years of data. On this chart, it is the first row is meetings, second row is letters, third row is website, and then the colors correspond to various neighborhoods. They're listed on the right-hand side. So I'll be going through these really quickly. If you want this data, we can definitely send it to you for more review. But you can see the effective before we started construction, letters was at 79% was what they considered the most effective. And then how effective was the communication during construction? Here we had letters, city extra was the second row, website, third row, and door notices, these door hangers that we put on the doors. So 70% felt the door notices were effective. Letters were 75% in 2018. How was the project funded? So we share this at the neighborhood meetings that we do 3 years out and up to the public hearing, where we discuss that it's probably 50% split between utility funds and special assessments. So we ask if they understood that. We've been running right in the 50%, 60% range. This year in 2018, 55% said they understood this cost split between utility funds and special assessments. How effective was the project team in understanding your specific construction-related issue? We were at 70%, or just under 70% in 2018. You can see it's ranged anywhere from 48 to 81% over that 5-year time frame. Did you know your city representative? Did you know your project inspector that we have out on site? So you can work with that person if you need to. But roughly 3 out of 4 did know their project contact. Aside from unexpected conditions such as weather-related delays, did we provide you enough notice? And those issues are typically water shutoffs, driveway access, roadway access, and parking. We typically do those with the door hangers, and you can see we range anywhere from 73% to 88% that we provided enough notice for the residents last year during reconstruction. So please describe conflicts you experienced. Parking, the biggest one on here is restoration. You know, we have that discussion every year, turf and restoration. This is just a few out of a host of comments that we received. So again, if you would like to see all those comments, we can get those over to you. Construction schedule changes, whereas there's another one in here. Question 8, did the project process, so the process of having meetings 2 to 3 years out, a real detailed meeting 1 year out, having the public hearing, having an on-site neighborhood meeting to meet your representative and the contractor, up through tonight, not through tonight, but up through construction and up through when we did the survey, did that meet your expectations? And 78% said it did meet expectations. This other question was about the infrastructure. Did the improvements meet your expectations? And we had 62% said that infrastructure improvements met their expectations. That's pretty consistent in the 60% over that 5-year time frame. And then lastly, we ask, how can we do better? What are some suggestions we can do to improve this process? Communication is highlighted. Landscaping and turf is, again, put on there many times. The narrowing in the streets, which you recall from all the public hearings, is a discussion item. So we have a lot of comments here, and I just wanted to share that with you before we started the public hearing. So again, if you'd like to see any more of those information or comments, I can definitely get that to you.
Would any of the council members like to inquire about some of the data that was gathered? One thing that affected me a little bit, I guess, is as I was watching that part of the presentation, it seemed like the Chowan D neighborhood had consistently lowest scores for us. They seemed the most dissatisfied with what went on. Low marks for communication, low marks for project approval. I mean, all the way through there.
Sure.
Some of them were less than 50%, and I'm wondering how you'd explain that.
Well, I'd say very small.
How you were at 100% in some neighborhoods, and that neighborhood in Chowan D, which was a big project, important project, the satisfaction level and the communication level was deemed, I think, unsatisfactory in Chowan Park D.
Well, I'd say, Mayor, maybe you're confusing. This year's project is a very large Chowan Park. In 18, there was only 7 properties. So
Okay.
you only get 1 or 2 that weren't happy, and the percentages go easily
that's
one
true.
way or the other. So we
True.
only had 7 surveys sent, and only 3 responded. So if all 3 of those responded in one
Okay.
way, so
That
that's,
helps.
if you recall, that small little project area along Minnehaha Creek. So
Okay, thank you. All right. Go ahead on the first proposed assessment.
thank you, Mayor. The first project tonight is BA 439. That's the Chowan Park D neighborhood, which the question was just raised. So here's the project map to refresh your memory. We had 54th Street, which was split with the city of Minneapolis. They did pay for a portion of the project. And then we had 2 alleys. We had the York Avenue Alley and the Zenith York Alley on the very western portion. We had 1 objection letter from 5405 York Avenue. It's the big property right kind of in the center, and that they have an alley-only assessment, so just under $2,200, but they did file a letter of objection. These are the project costs. The street costs accounted for about 40% of the project. The last 2 rows are the costs associated with the 2 alleys, just under $12,000 and just over $13,000. So we're proposing a special assessment for the street portion, $11,383.23 per residential equivalent unit. That's slightly above our estimate. For the Zenith York Alley, $2,995.32 per REU. Again, slightly above. They asked us to do a little additional paving in that alley. And then $2,177.98 per REU for the other alley, and that is under our estimate. So we would recommend you approve resolution number 2019-78.
Questions for Director Milner? Member Brindle?
Thank you. With regard to 5405 York Avenue, how are the properties in the area being assessed? How is that determined? Because I'm looking at this and it is not adjacent to anything that was reconstructed.
It is adjacent to the York Avenue alley. So just if you see the alley, if I can get the mouse, this Xerxes York Avenue, if you recall, this alley we reconstructed about 2 or 3 years ago. And we assessed everybody for that alley, including 5405. And many of those properties didn't have driveways or access to the alley. But our policy has been if you could put a driveway or another structure back in your backyard to access, you're going to be assessed as part of the alley improvements. So we used that same history that we did with that alley on this property, and that's why they were assessed, because they could come out and utilize this alley to the west.
It's a very funky area, because that is an alley that, you know, typically we think of an alley being behind a home, whereas here's York Avenue, and then there's this little offshoot that goes off of York Avenue and becomes an alley. So what you're saying is that they could put a driveway onto York Avenue.
York Avenue alley, correct. The green.
But they're not adjacent to the alley. They're adjacent to York Avenue.
Well, York Avenue stops up here when this is just a naming convention. There's a cul-de-sac up here. It's up higher, and that's where we consider this York Avenue. And then we called this the York Avenue Alley because it's such a small, it's only a 10 to 12 foot wide alley, basically. They're adjacent to that, so they could access that. So
okay, so this drawing is misleading then.
Well, yeah, it looks like it has a neck for York Avenue up there.
So if there is a...
Oh, yeah, that's just...
So why didn't you color the whole thing green up there, that whole neck? Just half, why did you just color half the neck?
I don't know.
Okay.
It was a graphic
all
we
right,
made
so that was my question,
Yeah,
because
it
if they're truly not adjacent to any part of this project...
No, it should have stopped here.
Okay.
The line, if that was confusing.
All right, thank you.
So that the York Avenue Alley serves 5400, 5406, 5408, 5410, 3113, and 5405.
Correct.
If they wanted it, they could, yeah. 3113.
Why doesn't it? For the same reason it does 5405.
Do all those other properties have access to the alley? Except
Every
for-
one on the west. No, this one, the driveway is west. There's a few sidewalks out the front, but there's some of the garages are out on this other alley, but they could still utilize the east alley if they wish to. And we're using that same policy that we've used on all alleys in town.
So there, there are other property owners similarly situated to 5405 that have theoretical access to the alley.
5400 is having 3 assessments on tonight. So they're doing both alleys and 54th Street. But the assessments for the alleys are, 2,000, 2,900, 27, and
Okay.
yep. So all those properties are treated the same.
Other questions for Director Milner at this point in time? All right, this is a public hearing matter. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to testify regarding these proposed special assessments? Okay, I don't see anybody coming forward. Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved. Second.
There's a motion and second to close the public hearing regarding the proposed assessment in the Chowan Park D neighborhood that's embodied in Resolution 2019-78. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. Is there a motion to adopt 2019-78?
So moved.
Got a motion and a second?
Second.
To adopt Resolution 2019-78. Now discussion. Any further discussion regarding that proposed special assessment based on the conversation we just had? All right. All those in favor of adopting Resolution 2019-78, which would approve the special assessment as proposed for Chowan Park D neighborhood roadway reconstruction improvement BA 439, say aye.
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 Opposed? Carried. All right, Director Milner, next matter is 2019-79, which is the project we did over on West 62nd Street.
Correct, Mayor and members of council, thank you. This was West 62nd Street. This was a municipal state aid road, so the assessments are, we assess 20% of the cost. 80% is funded out of the MSA system. The project goes from France Avenue to Valley View Road, as shown on the graphic. The street cost accounted for 61% of this project, $758,000. This was a 19% decrease from our CIP estimate. Using the 20% of that number, the assessable costs are just over $157,000, and the assessment we're asking you to approve tonight is $7,329.71 per REU. So that's an 8.5% increase. We found worse soils than we expected along the park. We had to do some additional subgrade corrections to support the street, so that's why that number increased slightly from our estimated assessment. We're recommending you approve the special assessment embodied in resolution number 2019-79.
Questions for Director Milner regarding the West 62nd Street neighborhood project? Member Brindle.
Go ahead.
Thank you. We have a letter from one of the residents. They are at 4120 West 62nd Street. And they claim there was damage on their property. We have an
You sure it's
objection
that?
letter.
Maybe I didn't see that one, but I thought there was one for 62nd Street in the Concord neighborhood, and I was going to share what that was.
No,
I haven't
it's-
seen that letter.
It's this one. Yeah, we live on West 62nd Street between France and Valley View. I don't plan to pay this assessment because of the damage caused to my house during this process, is
Yep,
the
and
letter.
then there was a graphic on there, and the graphic was from the Concord neighborhood, so maybe we got mixed up on, so I can't speak to what they're,
No, there's no graphic here.
and I can't speak to what they are perceiving as damage to the property.
Okay, so you're not aware?
No,
Okay.
I'm not. So the benefit of having this hearing, the first meeting in October, is that we still have time before we need to file this with Hennepin County. So if the county, or if the council so chooses and wants to get more information on a topic like this, I could come back at the next council meeting with some answers on that topic. But I have not seen that letter or known of any damage to that
Yeah,
property.
it came in on Sunday. The email came in on Sunday to Edina Mail. So, I guess I'd like to know what the damage is on that property and whether, and
What
how.
the alleged damage is?
Yeah, yeah, and whether that would affect how that property is assessed.
Well,
You
we
want to
usually
lay the whole
wouldn't.
matter over, or just as with respect to the assessment that would be particular or peculiar to their property?
So typically, property damage is driveways, irrigation system, pet fences, and we fix those. So if it's concerning that and it's not repaired, we can get those repaired. We typically have, at least as long as I've been here, never reduced an assessment for any kind of property damage. We've addressed the situation.
Okay,
We get
it
some
says
complaints.
damage caused to my house.
Well, and that speaks to potentially vibrations. People all of a sudden notice cracks in plaster, and then they can tell us about it, and we would submit that. That's why I have insurance with the contractor, and then the insurance companies
Okay.
would work that out. So, not knowing what damage to the house means, I can't answer the question.
Okay.
Member Fisher?
I was just curious, in a case where, I think you said it was 8% over the original estimates due to poor soils, do you send a letter then sort of outlining why the actual is above the estimate so people sort of understand what caused that?
We didn't, but when we send the notices out and they see the difference, then we get questions. People call us and we talk to them about why, but we haven't explained. We didn't put it in a formal letter. It's more emails and phone calls after they get the notice.
Feels like if you did that, you might reduce the number of calls or whatever. I don't know
yeah.
what your experience is. I mean, historically, I haven't seen many that go over, so it's maybe a newer.
It's pretty rare. On occasion, right? Here's one that
Yeah.
went slightly over.
It just feels like it might be worth a little proactive, one time, write the note, put it in with the assessment, and help people understand what that was all about.
Thanks.
Other questions, comments? Member Brindle, what was the address on that piece of property?
4120 West 62nd.
I suppose one thing we could do would be to adopt Resolution 2019-79 with an exclusion of 4120 West 62nd Street until you come back with some explanation.
Maybe-
Based on what Director Milner has stated, Member Brindle, what's your preference? Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's possible.
Well, no, but, yeah, yeah,
Okay,
let's hold off.
all right.
Okay. This is a public hearing matter for the proposed assessment on West 62nd Street. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to testify regarding this proposed special assessment for the properties encompassed in that street reconstruction area on West 62nd Street? Seeing no one coming forward and hearing nothing, is there a motion to close the public hearing with respect to proposed Resolution 2019-79?
So moved.
Second.
We got a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. We don't have any notice issues, do we? Everybody got
You got
served with
notice?
notice?
Yep, so maybe the city attorney has an opinion whether we should hold the entire assessment or leave one out. I don't know if there's a preference one way or the other, if you so choose to want to delay it till the 15th.
Or do nothing because this was their opportunity to appear?
This was their opportunity to appear, and you certainly can have staff check the property, but you could adopt the assessment roll tonight, and if we've damaged the property, then we'd send that claim to the insurance company.
Regardless, we'd do that.
Yes,
certainly.
So I'd adopt my recommendation is to adopt the assessment roll.
Okay.
Agreed.
All right. Having had that explanation, is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2019-79 with respect to the proposed roadway reconstruction special assessments on West 62nd Street?
So moved.
Second.
Got Got a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 2019-79, which embodies improvement BA 445. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of that resolution say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. Excuse me. And next, Director Milner, we have the proposed special assessment with regard to the Normandale Park D neighborhood.
Thank you, Mayor. This project, here's the project limits. It was in and around Valley Lane, just south of Highway 62. The streets accounted for 46% of the cost, just over $900,000. It was a 23% decrease from our estimates from the CIP. We divided it out by the number of REUs, and we're proposing an assessment per residential equivalent unit of $10,197.21. That's a 31% decrease from our estimates at the public hearing, and we would recommend approval of resolution number 2019-80, and I can stand for any questions.
Questions for Director Milner with regard to this proposed special assessment on the Normandale Park D neighborhood? All right. Stand by, Director Milner. I'm going to open this up. This is a public hearing matter. Is there anyone who wishes to testify in front of the council regarding this proposed special assessment? Please come forward. All right, seeing no one coming forward, hearing nothing from the audience, is there a motion to close the public hearing on proposed resolution 2019-80?
So moved.
Second. Is there a second? We got a motion and a second to close the public hearing with regard to resolution 2019-80. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. And then is there a motion to adopt resolution 2019-80 approving that special assessment as proposed for Normandale Park D neighborhood roadway reconstruction improvement embodied in BA 446?
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor of adopting the resolution 2019-80 as described say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. And next is the proposed special assessment for the Concord A and G neighborhood embodied in resolution 2019-81. Director Milner.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. This is the project area in and around the northeast quadrant of Highway 162, north and south of Valley View Road. There were 2 objection letters from the addresses shown there on the left-hand side of this slide. The street accounted for 44% of the cost at $1.4 million. The final cost of the project was 25% less than what we estimated in the CIP. We're estimating, or we're proposing an assessment tonight of $12,858.96 per REU. That is a 19% decrease from our estimates from the public hearing. And we would recommend approval of resolution 2019-81, and I'd stand for questions.
Questions for Director Milner with regard to this proposed special assessment for the Concord A and G neighborhood? All right, stand by. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to testify regarding this proposed special assessment for the Concord A and G neighborhood? Yes, yes, ma'am. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
Yeah, we're doing fine. We're doing well.
Good. So I do have a letter that I didn't submit, but I'll give it to the appropriate
Okay,
person.
if you give it to the clerk and she'll make it part of the record, and then if you give us your name and address, that would be a way we can start the conversation.
So my name is Melissa Zostowitz. I live at 6309 Virginia Avenue South. I've been a resident there since, and I own the property since 2005. And if you're not familiar where this property is located, it's right on 62, so it's the bottom of Virginia Avenue. So if you're driving down 62, you can see my house. You can wave to me if I'm in the front yard. Probably could say hi to you. And so as Mr. Milner indicated, I'm being assessed $12,858.96, and I'm requesting that there is a reduction to this assessment due to damage to my property, and I'll describe what had happened. So in the fall of 2017, I received a communication from Mr. Luther Overall asking that we trim the trees to 16 feet above the road. And my brother and I did that, and we had Luther come out to the house to make sure that we properly trimmed our trees. Our trees are really important to us there because we just have that chain link fence. We don't have any sound or sight barrier, so we really try to maintain the trees because it does really help with the sound and the sight. That's why we wanted Luther to come over and take care of it ourselves so that we were properly taking care of the trees and maintaining as much as possible. Luther came over actually and he trimmed a little bit of our cranberry trees, but he said we did a good job. And we said if there are any other trimmings that need to be done, can you ask us? Because we just didn't want somebody to come on and butcher the trees. So in the spring of 2018, when everyone was really preparing for the reconstruction, I walked out on our porch and I noticed that the people were taking down some major limbs of this tree. And I've pictures to show you of the limbs that they took down. And I ran outside and I said, no, stop. Our trees were approved by the city. And the guy working on it, and he was not a city employee, cursed at me and told me to get out. So I called up City Hall. I left a message for Luther, but then I was directed to Mr. Milner, and I left a message for him, and he was kind enough to have one of his folks reach out to me, and I can't remember his name, but he called me. He was kind of curt with me on the phone, ended up hanging up on me, and so I left a message for Chad, and he was very nice. He came out to my property, and I don't know if you recall looking at the trees with me, but we both agreed that this was a pretty unusual circumstance because it's not like we can put trees up and remedy the problem quickly with the sight and the sound. So one of the ideas that we had was maybe adding a second layer of paneling on the privacy fence that we have, because that would considerably help with the sound, but not the sight. And Chet said at the time, well, let me think about it. And I left a couple of messages. We just haven't been able to connect. And so I thought I'd come here tonight because I did reach out to Town and Country Fencing. They were the ones who built the fence, and they have the type of cedar that would match the fence. And what we estimated is that we would need 400 panels to put a second layer, and that would help with the sound. And they gave me an estimate, and it's in the material, of $2,999.95. That's just the materials, tax, and delivery. My brother and I can put up the fences because the labor is a lot, but we could do that on a weekend. And we're just asking that the city council consider help decreasing the assessment, so that would kind of cover some of the damage that's caused. Like I said, I do have pictures of the limbs and arrows pointing kind of the gaping hole now that we have. Now we look right onto 62. And I do want to let the council know, when the state did add the third lane to 62, that really has increased the sound quite a bit. For me, I'm right on the 62, but my neighbors have also said that has increased the sound. And we just have that chain link fence. And I call the police, I would say maybe 2 or 3 times a year, because in the wintertime, because of that curve, a lot of cars spin out on that curve, and hopefully no one will spin out and hit the fence, but it is something to consider in the future, to maybe put some more protection for the citizens of that community. So what I'm asking for is if the city council would consider just helping me out with this cost of putting an extra layer. Again, we would do the labor. We're just asking for the materials and tax and delivery of the wood.
Okay, good. Well, that's very helpful. That's a great explanation, Melissa. Let us have that conversation up here. Is there anyone else that wants to testify regarding this matter?
Frank Lorenz, 7151 York Avenue South. I have a question regarding this project for Director Milner. This project and the 3 that preceded it, or the 2 that preceded it, seem to have dramatic reductions, the actual bid, or the actual cost was 30% less than the estimate. And everything I read in the newspapers and find on the media says that there's an absolute shortage of construction workers. And I'm not aware that the price of Portland cement has gone down. So I'm wondering whether, when you bring in projects at a third less than the estimate, are your estimates lousy, or are your contractors substituting paper mache for Portland cement, or how is this happening? I mean, I can see projects like this. When you dig into the earth, you always find things you don't expect, or you frequently find. So, plus or minus 8% is probably part of being in the heavy construction business, but 30%. Is there something going on with these projects? Contractors sometimes bid at very little over their direct costs of labor and material in the depth of a recession, but that's not now. So I'm curious as to how or why these projects, or these last few, are coming in so much lower than the estimates.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Anyone else wish to testify? All right, let's close the public hearing in this matter. Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Do you have a second? Second. Got a motion and a second to close the public hearing with respect to the proposed adoption of Resolution 2019-81, which is the proposed Concord A and G. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, A and G neighborhood roadway reconstruction project. No further discussion. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye. 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 Opposed? Carried. Let's go to this issue involving Ms. Ostowitz and get your thoughts from a staff perspective, so we can have a thorough conversation on this.
So I don't doubt that she may have left me a phone message. I don't think I met with her. I'm usually really good about remembering faces, but I think she probably met with Carter. Oh, maybe it's Carter. Because he looks similar to myself. So this is the first time I've heard of this. We did not have a discussion about building fences in exchange for tree trimming, so I'd first like to review why the trees were trimmed. What was the issue that caused the tree trimming? Because she's not the only one that had trees trimmed in the neighborhood. When a hydrant goes in that's right next to a tree, we got to trim some stuff. So first I'd like to investigate why it was trimmed and what the issue was, and then review the fence issue. And Carter's still available, he just doesn't work with us, and I could review with him on the conversations. And then we would consider, again, if there's anything like this, we would pay for it. We wouldn't reduce assessment. So I don't think it's going to, unless you so choose to, change the assessment. So if there was something that we caused or could make them whole, we would pay for that under different funding sources than the special assessments. So. All
right, so under the circumstances where we want to further investigate these issues involving 6309 Virginia Avenue, I think.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Ms. Ostowitz's property. Mr. Knudsen, what's your recommendation here? That we just adopt the rule absent this property, or hold the whole matter over?
My recommendation would be adopt the rule, as we did in the other discussion, and have staff review, determine if someone made a mistake in cutting trees, and if it damages the road, then we can turn that over to the contractor who made the mistake, or our insurance company, or both.
All right, so how do we get to the issue of the fence panels that she said she probably had a conversation with, I think, with Carter Schulze before he left?
City staff will review what happened and see if the contractor made an error in cutting those trees. And if the contractor erred in cutting those trees, then we'll seek reimbursement from the contractor or our insurance company.
And what form of reimbursement is taken there? I mean, you cut a couple of key tree limbs down at the end of Virginia that insulate them from the crosstown. How do you go about determining the value of the damage?
city staff would have to review it and determine whether it was wrong to trim those trees, and second, what is the appropriate remedy. They come back with a recommendation to talk to the contractor, and maybe the contractor would pay for those, for the fencing, or maybe it'd be a cash payment.
Okay.
I don't think that could be resolved tonight.
That prompt any further thoughts or comments from council members?
I was just curious. So I just passed down the photos, which helps. Which, Chad, I know you don't even have, so it might be hard for you to picture what happened. But I guess it's hard for us to get into the nuance and the details of it. So I do think it would be appropriate for staff to kind of look into this particular issue, and then and it makes sense to do it separate than the assessment, right? Because if something happened that shouldn't have happened, then there are ways to remedy that, and then we can keep the full assessment going, and I think that makes sense as a potential solution.
All right. Okay. All right. So is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2019-81, which would approve the special assessment roll as proposed for Concord A and G neighborhood roadway reconstruction project, embodied in improvement number BA 447?
Second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second on Resolution 2019-81. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried.
And then will you be able to bring back to us just sort of what ultimately happens here?
Yeah, I just got her business card, we got her phone number, I'll reach out, we'll have a discussion, whatever comes, I can either email the council directly or put it on a future council meeting, so I'll see if we have a preference one way or the other.
Thank you.
This just dawned on me while Ms. Ostowitz was talking about the addition of the third lane. You know, usually when MnDOT adds a lane, they bring in sound barriers. And so I don't know if we ever even raised that issue with them, but it strikes me that we should go back to MnDOT and say, hey, wait a minute, this is great. You got that third lane for access westbound on Crosstown, but it's really created more noise. Sound decibels are way up on some of those streets that abut the Crosstown, and can't you come back and put in a sound barrier, sound wall?
Yep, it's a temporary measure just for the 494 or 9435W project. So they only anticipate keeping that extra lane for the duration of that project. So it was just to alleviate traffic in the short term, and then they don't have no intention of keeping it there. They continue to study 62 for additional lanes from Eden Prairie all the way to the airport, just like they're doing on 494. So that's a temporary measure to
I think it's a mistake to have that a temporary measure. That's been an unbelievable traffic reliever. So anyway, we can talk to MnDOT about that.
Correct.
But I'm also going to talk to them about a sound barrier over there. If we can convince them to keep the lane there, and then I think they should put a sound barrier in. So let's see where we go with that idea, on top of your idea.
Thank you.
All right? Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in tonight.
Thank you.
All right.
One more thing, did you want me to address any Mr. Loren's comments on
Oh, sure.
project costs? So the way we do it, we try to get out.
Why the estimates sometimes run less than the actual cost.
Yeah, so we try to get out real early before any other cities. So we're using our last 3 to 4 years of bid prices that we've seen, and so far those are holding going forward by going out early. We've had other cities that have bidding in May and June, and they see their prices have been skyrocketing. So again, for this upcoming season, we're hoping to get out early, get good prices, and again, see those reductions. We'd rather have reductions than going back to members of our community saying we got to go up 30%. So we do build a pretty decent contingency in there, considering our bid prices, our bond ratings, and just hoping that we don't go back and say we need a lot more to our residents.
Okay. Next matter is Country Club C neighborhood proposed roadway reconstruction special assessment embodied in Resolution 2019-82. Director Milner, you have this matter as well.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Here's the project map. It's just a few parcels right at 50th and Wooddale. The street accounted for 36% of the project cost at just over $68,000. This one did come in above our CIP estimate because we added some utility work that we didn't anticipate when we did our CIP estimate. We're proposing a special assessment of $10,026.30 per REU. That's a 4% decrease. We would recommend approval of resolution number 2019-82, and I'd stand for questions.
All right, questions with regarding this proposed assessment? All right, stand by. This is a public hearing matter. I'm opening it up for public testimony. Is there anyone here that wants to testify regarding the proposed special assessment embodied in Resolution 2019-82 regarding the Country Club C neighborhood? Hearing nothing and seeing no one coming forward, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Got a motion and second to close the public hearing on Resolution 2019-82. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2019-82, which would approve the proposed special assessments for the Country Club C neighborhood roadway reconstruction improvement embodied in BA 448?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Got a motion second on Resolution 2019-82. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the adopting the resolution as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. And then the last public hearing matter is proposed special assessment in the Bredesen Park A neighborhood regarding a roadway reconstruction project we did over there as well. Director Milner.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. The project location map is shown. 2 cul-de-sacs, Waterford Court and Habitat Court, shown right at 62 and Highway 169. The streets accounted for 58% of the project cost, just over $114,000. We're proposing an assessment of $5,510.03 per REU. That is a 6% decrease from our estimates. We would recommend approval of resolution number 2019-83, and I can stand for any questions.
Questions for Director Milner with regard to this proposed special assessment 2019-83. Member Brindle.
Thank you. So I notice on the assessment roll that everybody is assessed for less than 1 REU. Can you explain why?
These are multifamily units. So in our policy, we assess 0.8. So that's what you're seeing in the assessment roll.
Oh, these
They're
are
not
like
standalone single family. They're connected.
double home kind of things?
Yep.
Oh,
Multifamily.
Okay, thank you.
Good. All right, stand by, Director Milner. This is a public hearing as well. Is there anyone here that wishes to testify regarding this proposed special assessment in the Bredesen Park A neighborhood? All right, hearing nothing, seeing no one coming forward, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion second to close the public hearing. Discussion? All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. And is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2019-83, which would approve the special assessments as proposed by staff for Bredesen Park A neighborhood roadway reconstruction improvement number BA 450?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion second on 2019-83 as described. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. All right. Good. Thanks, Director Milner. And then we're on to reports and recommendations, and Manager Neal has the next matter.
Thank you, Your Honor. The next matter is requesting the council to accept a grant from the federal government called it's a SAFER grant. SAFER is an acronym that stands for Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response. We'd had some discussion about this at our September 17th meeting, and I think it's worth repeating some of that for the council tonight. Chief Schmitz and I discussed making an application to this program earlier this year in January. We made an application in late January, early February, and the timeline of the grant at the time we made the application was that we would be informed in July whether we had received the grant funds or not. And July came and went. We didn't hear anything. It's not unusual for you to not hear something if you're not going to receive grant funds in a federal program like this. So we did not receive notification or funding. We didn't receive funding notification in July. So we moved forward with our budget through the last stages of getting the council to approve the levy and also approve the kind of the tentative spending plan. Well, the week before you were to approve the levy, the maximum levy, we did hear from the Department of Homeland Security, and we don't know why it took this long. It's possible that other cities who did receive funding turned out to reject it, and so it came back for another round. That's a possibility. But it wasn't soon enough. We didn't receive enough notice where we could make changes to our formal budget presentation for the council. So we told you the night that you set the preliminary levy that this was not included in the levy, but we told you that we would take a deeper look at it in both the fire department and finance departments to see if there was a way we could accept this. And we have done that, and we've had a pretty good interior look at our budgets on our fire side and also the city budget. And we have figured out a way that we could proceed with accepting this grant for a 3-year period of 2020, 2021, and 2022. The total benefit of the grant is $911,821. That will provide us with 6 new firefighters. The benefit of that is that it expands the number of paramedics that we have on each shift. And the benefit of that is that we have more people who are able to both work on a fire truck and also respond via ambulance. And the biggest benefit that it has is that we would be able to adequately staff and almost permanently staff Medic 3, which is currently our 3rd ambulance option. And as we've talked before, we're running into a stage in this city's history, and really with people, with our residents, where we are getting continued increases every year in calls for service on both the police side and the fire side. And most of those on the fire side are EMS calls. So this would allow us to more adequately respond to the EMS calls that we receive. We think that's important, and we'd ask for the council's support of the resolution tonight.
All right, questions for Manager Neal or comments with regard to this proposed grant?
I was curious how you're going to get creative with this one.
Sure. First of all, remember that the 2-year budget we presented to you had funding for 3 firefighters starting in year 2, starting in the 2nd year of that budget. So we were able to identify funding. We had funding already for that. So adding that funding in year 2 that covers part of that number. But in the year 1 in 2020, we are changing the way that we're funding some risk management costs. We're going to change the way that we fund the Cahill study costs and take that out of our. We do some planning studies out of our CIP when they reach a certain level, just like we did the comp plan study. So we're going to do that. We're reducing some costs in the fire department, and we're also proposing to make a small pledge out of the 2019 surplus going forward as well. So those costs together will cover the balance between what we already had budgeted and the difference in the grant funding for 2020. And then for 2021, we should be okay.
So for 2021, we'll be okay because it's in the budget.
It's not only we have 3 positions already been factored into the budget for that year, but we haven't set our levy for that year either. So that's where the other benefit comes.
All right, thank you.
So the total projected cost for 3 years is $1.478 million. I'm just wondering about the long-term budgetary implications. We got 3 planned for, and I mean, it looks like it's a tantalizing sort of thing, close to $1 million. But what about the long-term implications for our budget? If we're taking care of if the cost for 3 years is $1.478 million. What I hear you saying is we're gonna basically cut that in half with budgetary changes, but that still is going to leave us in the long run with a issue of $250,000 to $300,000 a year in budgetary increases we're going to have to figure out.
That's right. This will
starting
take
3 years from now.
This will take us, using the Novak study as the Novak staffing study as our guide, this will take us to the point that Novak was recommending in terms of staffing availability on a per shift basis. That will take us to a staffing shift of 11 people, so 1 captain, 1 lieutenant, and 9 paramedics, which, given the current and the anticipated demand for services, is what we need to be able to operate the fire apparatus and the calls for service that receives, and also the ambulance calls for service as well. So we're able to fund, we're able to keep up with our funding demands in the study that were predicted. But yeah, I think we wouldn't want you to think that we're able to do that for free, because we're not. But $911,000 is helpful in terms of phasing in that levy impact into our baseline tax levy, which is the way it's probably more accurately depicted.
Other questions? It's a pretty dramatic change in employee level in one fell swoop.
Mm-hmm.
I see the allure in this federal money, but I am concerned that 3 years from now, are we still going to need all six of them? I mean, it's easier to fire or hire somebody than to terminate them if we don't need them.
Yeah.
You hate to do that with people. So I just still concerned about the long-term budget implications of coming up after year 3 with $300,000 more a year.
I don't think there's any question that activity levels or calls for service are going to go down. Given our population and given the aging of our population, they're going to go up. So there isn't, I have zero concern that we're not going to have enough work for the people that we're talking about hiring here.
Yeah, and that's all consistent with the Novak study.
It is.
Because that was one of the questions I had for you. I didn't go back and look at the Novak study.
Yep,
but
I have it here. The other complication in this for you tonight is that tonight's sort of the decision day for this grant. By the way that it was notified to us and the decision timeline that we have a 30-day time period to say yes or no. So this is the final regular meeting for us to say yes or no to the resolution.
Other thoughts on this issue? Oh, Member Anderson.
Thank you. It seems that this is really a gift in that we're anticipating moving to this level of staffing regardless. The demand is there, and our growth warrants that. So consistent with the Novak study to say, well, we can offset this cost for some period of time. And yes, there's going to be a budget struggle in 2 or 3 years out because you have to figure out how to keep these guys online. But there'll be other additional costs as well, where to house them. We have that to figure out as well. So to me, I think that this is it's a good idea to accept these funds and also anticipate that we'll be grappling with this issue for quite a while, actually.
All right, well, I think we all had reliance on that Novak study. It was eye-opening, I would say, in terms of what our long-term needs are going to be with both with respect to firefighters, EMTs, and police officers. Member Staunton.
I'd move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Got a motion and second to adopt Resolution 2019-87, which would accept the Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response Grant in the amount of $911,820.60 over 3 years from the federal government. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. And now we are going to talk about what's called Initiative Number 5. It's the study and report on climate action plan parameters, and I think the Energy and Environment Commission would like to see us get moving on a climate action plan, and that's what they're here to discuss.
You always get the coveted at the end of the agenda spot.
You noticed that?
Yeah, it's a little earlier
What did you do wrong?
I don't know, maybe I need to bring cookies to the staff some point in time. So good evening, I'm Carolyn Jackson. I'm chair of the Edina Energy and Environment Commission. I'm going to introduce our team here. It is our initiative to study and report on a climate action plan. You'll remember this spring, a group of students stood up and said, we need a climate inheritance resolution, we need a climate action plan, and we need it now. So you graciously passed the climate inheritance resolution, and we're here to tell you climate action plans aren't fast, but this is where we're coming from. So a little history. The Vision Edina process went forward, and we got the values of our community. Participants in that process were more supportive of environmentally responsible practices than any other area. So this is something our community really cares strongly about. We underwent the Partners in Energy process a few years ago. It created an electricity action plan, which is a lot like a climate action plan, only it was just focused on electricity. And it helped us put together a decision-making structure. We found that government, residents, and businesses all have different decision-making processes, but they all need to be a part of the action. In 2018, in the comprehensive plan, our Energy and Environment chapter reiterated our climate action goals that we want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions 30% by 2025 and 80% by 2050 from a 2005 baseline. We acknowledged the UN report on climate change in the comprehensive plan, and we called for a coordinated environmental plan. In 2018 and 2019, we took some initial actions. Thank you very much for adopting compost recycling. Methane gas that comes from compost in landfills is a big greenhouse gas emitter, and we got the building benchmarking ordinance that gives Energy Star for buildings. So we're well on our way, but now it's time for coordinated action. So my vice chair is going to tell you more.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson.
Thank you, Chair Jackson. I'm Lauren Satterley. I'm the Vice Chair of the Energy and Environment Commission. And just to speak to the future, the community continues to be concerned about climate change. As you know, the 2019 Quality of Life Survey reflected that 75% of residents agree that the city should invest in programs that create policies to address climate change and programs. 86% of residents identified adapting to climate change as important, with 63% of those rating it as essential or very important. We've had an urgent call from the Edina's youth this year. They've requested 2 items: a climate inheritance resolution, which the council adopted in August, and a climate action plan. The 2019 EEC work plan called for a study and report on parameters for a climate action plan. This report included key components of a climate action plan, including mitigation, adaptation, and resiliency strategies, and equity, inclusion, and community input considerations. The first steps could include a greenhouse gas emissions inventory and a climate risk assessment. This would inform the climate action plan going forward. It would also include establishing indicators and regularly measuring progress on those indicators. So we're in a great time of opportunity to lead as a city, bringing together existing sustainability efforts and specific steps to reach our greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals, to adapt to the impacts of climate change under a comprehensive climate action plan. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Satterley. Commissioner, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Jackson and Vice Chair Satterley. Mayor and members of council, the EEC, the Energy and Environment Commission, is submitting this report that builds the case for a climate action plan because these types of plans involve a process to prioritize, identify dependencies and structural changes, and require community engagement to move forward on these community goals. Over the past few years, we have been working on climate initiatives to set up the city operations for emission reduction and begin community support on programs that have seen results in other cities. Chair Jackson mentioned those as far as curbside organics and becoming the 31st city in the nation to implement a building benchmarking program. And we recognize the benefits of a climate action plan as staff has recommended it for the next work plan. While this past year we have been taking action, we've also been observing the evolution of climate action plans. Commissioner Satterlee listed the parameters that her and the rest of the commission worked on this past year to better understand. I want to call out 2 key points for you, which is scope and approach. When considering scope, climate action plans of the past have focused on mitigation or reducing our carbon footprint. However, we are already quickly seeing the impacts of climate change, as you have enlisted a flood risk strategy task force to identify the key one, which is flooding in the state of Minnesota. While we could tackle these in separate issues and different plans, there are stacked benefits mentioned in their report to reviewing and prioritizing actions for mitigation and adaptation, as it's called, at the same time. We have also seen an evolution in approach to climate action plans. Climate action plans that begin and end with the emission reduction goals see challenges in full adoption and may not be accessible to all community members. While it is critical that we measure our emissions and that helps us understand our progress, it helps us understand the performance of these projects, many communities are finding better success in centering the community discussion around outcome-based goals. Instead of leading the conversation with how do we reduce our carbon emissions, it poses questions like, how do we create equitable community benefits that drastically reduce our carbon emissions? This type of discussion with the community better provides insight and informed priorities. Let me give you an example that another city has seen. In their previous plan, they had goals to reduce transportation emission. And one of their tactics is, well, everyone needs to ride the bus more. If everyone just did one more trip, we'd reduce our emissions. And this type of program and project resulted in educational actions and incentives. However, they are now beginning on their second realm of climate action plans. And they are now engaging the community on outcome-based goals. And they're hearing the hurdles and barriers to this system, transportation being accessible to them. This type of conversation, you may hear something more like, well, I'd like to ride the bus more, but I don't have a safe route to the bus. I don't have a sidewalk between my residency and the bus stop. So this type of discussion is what we want to look at to help inform projects to create those equitable community benefits that also drastically reduce emissions. One reason this report is coming to you today at this session is because last week or yesterday, Climate Week ended. And it was important to get this report to you as that was happening. The next steps for the council, I would say I'd recommend, is to receive this report and thank EEC for their work on this. I'm recommending that staff meet to review these report parameters, also review the city goals, the data needs that we'd have to start off this program, and present to you a process and a scope of work for a climate action plan. We had already scheduled a meeting for December 17th, your work session, to present that kind of process, so we could complete that in the next 90 days. Thank you.
Questions for Ms. Brown? All right, good. I think that's a good process. Member Fisher?
I'm just curious, when you, and it's assuming we approve this and recommend, moving forward with scoping, as we hear from some members of the community kind of questioning the whole premise, are we really warming, all that kind of stuff, how do we just like we do with development projects and everything else, how do we continue to involve our entire community, even though they might not be fully buying into what we may believe or what we're trying to do here, but still get that input. And I think part of it is just the what you're just talking about. It's like talking about how we're building out community benefits versus just saying you got to change behavior. We can change behavior by building out our community to enable it, and so that's a good direction. But just can you speak to how we might engage people, and then maybe that's part of the scoping?
That is part of the scoping, and it's a great question that we're trying to tackle. EEC continues to tackle that, and that's one reason, for example, they look to educate on recycling this next year. They didn't say create new events to educate people on recycling, but go to where the people are and help table those events to be there to answer questions or inform. Part of it is also just relationship building. We'll have to do more relationship building to help ensure that people feel welcome to be a part of this conversation so we can find those benefits, those stacked benefits for all.
Yeah, it's sort of like, people might be afraid, well, I'm not part of that choir, but I have a voice, and how do I, and I think by feeling comfortable participating in that, maybe they can learn more and both ways gain a little bit. So that was my question. My comment is, I think this report, the work here was really well done, and it just answered lots of questions. It made it very matter of fact, what we're trying to do. And I love the fact that the student member was doing some of the research and really engaged, and I think that's great. So thank you.
Good. Other questions or comments? Otherwise,
I just want to echo it's a staggering amount of work. Vice Chair Satterley, especially, I note the report has the word compiled by. I think that's probably an understatement. So thank you for your work on it. I do remember Chair Jackson being part of the visioning process in 2015, and it was a value that our community said loud and clear it was ready to step up and tackle, and so I appreciate all the efforts that you put in on it.
Thank you. Member Brindle.
Thank you. So some of your comments bring to mind an article that appeared in the Star Tribune just recently on September 29th about mobility hubs in Minneapolis. And the mobility hub addresses just what you talked about. It's from where a person lives to where they get transit and how they get there, whether it's on foot or by a scooter or a bicycle or whatever it might be, and addressing what that is and trying to remove that barrier in order to increase ridership in transit. And the opposite, the end of the ride is true as well, is that last mile. When you reach the stop that is going to get you to your destination, there's a barrier there as well that causes you to get in your car and get to that destination. So one of the most compelling pieces of information in that article to me, and it's something that we should really think about how we can address this here, because we have a bigger problem than the city of Minneapolis. I consider the city of Minneapolis pretty decently served by transit. Yet, the ridership in the city of Minneapolis is 13%. That it's not even 25% or 20% is just staggering for me, that it's 13%. And so that means to me that there's a lot of people. I talk about Edina and why we choose to drive from place to place. And I can't believe in Minneapolis that it's 13%. I thought it would be much higher. So that article really resonated with me in the challenge that we have to get people out of their cars and using transit. So,
Member Anderson.
Good. Yeah. Thank you, and thanks for your hard work. I appreciate it, as everyone does. Just to kind of piggyback on Member Fisher's comments, it is often in the community that you come across conversations, and those conversations can be about, well, gee, show me the science and what does this really mean? But the reality is, inescapably, that this year, our planet will be populated by 7 billion people. Next year, it'll be 8 billion people. What does that mean? What it means is that we are consuming resources as a species. We're consuming resources at a pace that has never been met before. So when we stand back and look at that, we recognize that the problems are all macro. And the questions that come forward are macro questions. But the solutions are always micro. They have to be. You have to do something today in your part, in your area, in your life. And it's regardless of how you look at it. If somebody wants to reject the concept of climate change, okay, but how about this? If you buy less gas, it means that you're spending less in your life. There's lots of ways to look at this problem, but the problem is inescapable. We've got to do better at conserving, and in the end, that's the micro solution that we can create in our town, in this place right now. We simply conserve. We are more efficient about energy loss. We're more efficient about transportation. So thanks again.
So that's a wonderful point to stop at. I just want to reiterate that pollution is waste. And I don't know who's in favor of waste. I'm certainly not. And so regardless of what anybody thinks about climate change, we're looking at reducing waste and making our community more connected and addressing the increase in flooding. So these are all win-win-win things to do. And so I thank you very much for all your support.
All right, thank you. So we have an action that's requested in our packet. There's a little variation on that. I think Tara Brown suggested something slightly different than what's in front of us here, but I think here's a motion the way I see it. Receive the Energy and Environment Commission's study and report on the parameters for a climate action plan. Thank them for that work and direct staff to start working on analyzing that work and creating the parameters of an actual plan for us as a council to approve. Does that fairly state what we want to do next? Is there a motion to adopt that resolution?
Moved.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second to adopt that resolution as stated. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. I also join my colleagues in thanking you, commissioners, for being here this evening, and the rest of the commissioners that have worked and continue to work so hard to make our community more sustainable and cleaner, greener. And for Ms. Brown, I can't laud you enough for the work that you're doing as our sustainability coordinator in making us a better place for people to live and making sure that we have actions that match up with our words. And I think we're heading in great directions here. And I thank you in large part for that, for the guidance that you're giving both the commission and the council and our community as a whole. Thank you.
I have a follow-on comment, and that is that there's a working group of the Transportation Commission that is working right now to draft and propose a new ordinance for travel demand management, TDM ordinance. A TDM ordinance is triggered by a certain size of development. It could be a new development of a certain size or greater, or it could be an expansion of a current business or residential property of a certain size of expansion or greater. And we will be, and I'm advising that working group. So I think it's fair to say we will be coming to you, Tara, for advice on what can we do, how can it be enforceable, and it's not something where they come up with a plan and they have a plan. They have to report on it year after year of how they're complying with their plan. That's kind of the the idea that we're putting in the ordinance. And so we're going to be coming to you to say, how can we do this and make it enforceable? So we'll be looking for some help on that.
Good. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, commissioners. Ms. Brown. All right. Correspondence of petitions, anything other than what was on the dais this evening?
Nope, nothing more.
Okay. And how about an aviation noise update from Member Brindle?
All right. I have a couple things. The next meeting of the Noise Oversight Committee will be on Wednesday, November 20th at 6:30 in the evening. This is the one time in the year that the Noise Oversight Committee holds its meeting in the evening to make it easier for members of the public to attend, for those who cannot attend during the day. At the last meeting, which was, this is October, okay, at the last meeting, which was in September, at our last council meeting, I presented some ideas, maybe it was 2 meetings ago now, but about an airport relations commission, and I am going to move forward with this, and Manager Neal, schedule some time with you to talk that through, okay? Because I do think, moving forward, I do think that that is going to be an invaluable resource for aviation noise and in giving the community a voice. And the September NOC meeting, 2 items were added to the 2020 work plan of the Noise Oversight Committee, and they reflect the work of Edina and Edina's representation on the NOC. And these ideas came, one of them anyway, came from the listening session. So it came directly from a resident. Why runways receive unbalanced numbers of nighttime arrivals. So there will be, like particularly over Morningside, parallel runways, you'll get a whole lot of arrivals here, and you'll get another parallel runway over here that isn't getting very many. So the south gets more than the north, or vice versa. And just studying why that is and why they can't be balanced. And therefore spread things out a little more equitably. And the second thing is looking at departures, 30L and 30R departures, which affect the part of Edina, South Minneapolis, up crosstown, kind of over the Edina Community Center in that direction. That can the departure flights can be pretty incessant, particularly on times of day where people are going to arrive in time for a business meeting, and or times of day going west. For example, when a flight is going to arrive before the end of the workday, there's a lot of flights that go west at that time to get people out before the end of the workday there. So just looking at what are the patterns and what are the noise levels. Similar study was done in Egan, and so I thought it'd be a good idea to do a study on flights that come this direction.
Who would do that study?
The NOC.
NOC will, and
Yeah.
they will do that?
Yes. Okay. Yep. And so they will put in additional remote listening towers. Okay. And
do they need a formal request from the council to do that, or how do
no?
we go
I
about
already
it?
gave it to them. I already gave them the request, and they accepted it. So
Okay,
it's part of the work plan. We could certainly do something as a council in recognition to that, and let them know that we appreciate that these 2 items are in the work plan, understanding that it's going to add some staff time to what they're doing that will benefit Edina.
Yeah. Manager Neal?
Those are the mobile towers, right?
Yeah, the mobile
Okay,
towers,
okay.
exactly.
Right.
Yep. Yep. So Egan has 3 permanent towers, maybe. I think 3. Egan gets a ton of traffic, as you might imagine.
I'm thinking their closest permanent tower is like 44th and Xerxes or somewhere in that.
Somewhere in
It's on
there.
the
There
west
isn't one
side
in
of
St.
the-
Louis Park, and there isn't one in Edina.
Right.
So they would put mobile towers in to do this measurement.
Yep.
And they would, find places that they can chain them to a tree,
Right.
that kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay.
And then just thanks to residents who attended the listening session because they were heard.
Oh, good. All right, thank you for that update. Manager Neal, anything supplemental there?
Nothing more to that.
Okay. Mayor and council comments, Member Fisher?
None for me tonight, thanks.
Member Staunton?
Just one item. I'm the last presentation we had from the chair and the vice chair of the Energy and Environment Commission is yet another illustration of the great work that folks on our commissions do for us in a variety of ways. And our work session tonight was one of the 2 times of the year that really reminds me how lucky we are in our community to have such an abundance of generous and talented people volunteering for the community. In February or March, after we finish our interviews every year, we're always staggered by the number of people who come in and have such amazing talents and generosity in providing them to the city. And then on a night like tonight, we go through all of the things that our chairs and vice chairs and other members of our commissions are proposing to do for the next year. And it's, again, a really inspiring display of people in our community who are just trying to do something constructive to make our community a better place. And I just wanted to call out again all of those folks on all of our boards and commissions who do such great work without asking for any recognition or any compensation. They just volunteer their time and they make our community a better place. And I just wanted to take a minute and thank them for that.
Thank you. And Member Brindle?
Thank you. So we got an inquiry just recently from a resident about a rate increase from their trash hauler, and it's a rate increase with no notice. And a number of years ago, I looked into this because it was a conversation just out by the mailbox with a couple of neighbors, and we all have the same exact contract with the trash hauler, and we were being charged wildly different rates. And so I called and I said, why is this? And they said, oh, no, we'll reduce your rate. So I discovered that if you call every January and question the rate, they'll lower it. But if you don't call and question it, they'll raise it, but they don't have to tell you about it. So I would like to know if the contract that the city of Edina has with that allows these haulers to come into the city and work with Edina residents. How does that work? Do they have a contract with the city? How does a hauler get to work in Edina?
So we are a private hauling city, open market city. We contract for our own waste collection from public space. So we are a customer of a hauler as well.
Right.
So that's a relationship we have as a vendor customer. Excuse me. But we don't have a role in between a residential customer and their hauler any more than we have a role in between them and their Verizon carrier or their gas provider or any other kind of private vendor that we have. We license haulers, but we don't get that far into the relationship between the hauler and the customer.
All right. Well, this is maybe a question for Attorney Knutson. Regarding the statute about private haulers working in a city, is there anything there that could require a hauler to inform a resident that they're going to increase their rate before they increase their rate, rather than just waiting for the resident to discover that on their invoice?
To the best of my knowledge, there is no such requirement, but I'll double check.
Okay. If not, I think we could maybe work on a request for a statute change. See if we can make that change, and if it
Make
is
a
their-
request for what, member Brindle?
A request that they tell residents when there's going to be a rate increase, rather than
Well, we don't regulate them. That's a matter of a private contract between the hauler and a resident.
Right, but there is a statute that talks about hauling.
I'm not sure.
The only statute, Mayor and Council, that I'm aware of is the organized collection statute.
It is just for organized?
Organized collection, yeah.
All right.
Yeah. No, we've probably got an ordinance in place with respect to recycling.
Yeah.
Where we do the
Yep.
contract.
Yep, we do that contract. I'm just wondering if there's any way that residents can be notified that there will be a rate increase. And it sounds like the industry just does not operate that way.
I would say that's my observation as well.
Member Anderson.
I just wonder, we could draft a disclosure requirement, though. I mean, you can't ask the haulers, they're permitted to work in the town. So why can't we insist that they inform their customers that they're going to have a rate increase?
If we could, I would love to.
It may not fall under statutory requirement, but we could make that requirement of them, I think.
If they are going to get a permit to work here.
Well, they don't have a permit to work here.
Yeah. How do they must gain.
Then how is it that we have 6
We
haulers
don't issue
listed on the
permits
on the website?
We don't issue permits to garbage haulers, private garbage haulers. I don't think.
Well, why can't I hire the hauler I want then?
You are.
Well, from a list. How do they get on that list?
Okay.
That's on the city.
We license them. We license garbage haulers.
They get on the list because past councils have asked us, can we do something to help people find haulers? And so we have done that before. We don't endorse any of them. They're licensed haulers, so they can haul here. But Councilmember Anderson's request is, could we make the license, could we incorporate something like this into the license? We'll talk about that with the city attorney.
So is it a City of Edina license that you issue to that hauler?
Right.
Okay, all right.
But it's not, the purpose of that license generally isn't, there's not a consumer protection element of it, but we can talk about that with the city attorney to see if that's a possibility.
Okay, all right, that's what I have, thank you.
Okay, good. Member Anderson.
Nothing more from me.
All right. Just a couple things for me. Tomorrow is walk and bike to school day.
Ooh.
And if you want to join me at Concord School at 7:15 in the morning, I'll see you there. And then I'm going to also do announcements, I guess, at Concord School.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so that'll be fun.
Oh, that would be fun.
And then I received a letter, I don't know if it was in your packets, from young Henry Freeman over on Mirror Lakes Drive, and he thinks it's a good idea to put a skate park in Edina. Well, we have one skate park over by the Y. I don't think Henry probably knew about that, but he's talking about skate parks being super fun. And because you can do pretty much anything there, like you can skateboard, scooter, and bike.
Super fun. Fun, not fund.
Super fun.
Yeah.
Thank you. I get the environmental orientation here. You know, this is what happens when your body is still on the time 7 hours later. Skate parks can be far away. My dad takes me to a skate park in St. Louis Park. So I'll let him know about the one over by the Southdale Y and see if that meets his standards. And if not, we can find out from young Henry what else other towns have that we don't. And I'll take care of that, and that's it for me.
Oh, that's great.
Manager Neal.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to talk to you in a little more detail about virtual town hall at the next council meeting, but tonight I just want to give you the heads up that at our next meeting on October 15th, you will be receiving a presentation from the Chamber of Commerce concerning their budget, very specifically the budget of the Convention Visitors Bureau at Explore Edina. That is not something that we have done before, but it is a requirement that they submit their budget to the council for approval. So they are doing that this year, and at the next meeting is when that's going to happen. That's all I've got.
Good. That prompted anything else from anybody for the evening? All right, good. All right, some good work done tonight. Thanks, folks, for your good participation, and we stand adjourned.